surprisingly hard if you actually wake up and say, I want to do something. Like, who do I call? What do I do? Right? How can I do my job? Um, uh, and I think we have a huge potential. I don't only think, I know, because we've been studying the numbers, to do more collectively if we are smarter about how we open.
Hi, welcome in new episode number 12 with Engineering Encyclopedia with Kristian Mjøen, PhD in candidate. Welcome in Engineering Encyclopedia. If we say Kristian Mjøen, how you can explain about yourself?
Wow, that's a big question. But first of all, thank you, Mohammad, for having me on your podcast. So, given that this is an encyclopedia of engineering, I can say at least that I'm an engineer by training. So I'm a physicist, and I've later studied management and spent a lot of my life in especially bigger organizations, public and private, and increasingly using that insight as an engineer and a social scientist to understand how organizations and cities can become more sustainable under the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's kind of my passion and my training. And I'm half Norwegian, half English. I have 2 kids, live here in Trondheim, trying to survive the winter like everyone else.
Yeah. And if we say you have experience in France, what do you remember about France and how you study there and what you do in France before?
Yeah, so I don't know, I cannot explain why, but I had this idea from very early on that I wanted to go to France. So I was kind of fascinated by the food, the culture, the literature. So when I kind of got old enough to travel, 16, 17, I decided I will go and stay with a French family for at least a year. So with my parents' blessing, I was able to find a family in the southwest of France, outside of Bordeaux, on the coast of the Atlantic. And I went there, and I went to college for a year, learning French. And basically ever since I've been going back there at least once a year to stay with my adopted family. So France has a special place in my life.
Mm-hmm. So now you speak French, English, Norwegian, and you can speak something more?
My Arabic is very bad. So those are my 3 main languages, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. About NTNU, you have studied in NTNU PhD candidate, and I think you use your time long in NTNU. Have you worked with them, or just you study, and have you making some course in NTNU before?
So like a lot of young people, I went to university. I started studying engineering to become a physical engineer. And during that time, I got fascinated by how a university works, how it receives its students, what kind of learning experience the university like NTNU has to offer. So from the first few days of my studies, basically, and especially towards the end of my degree, I got more and more involved in work on developing the learning environment for students at NTNU. In turn, like playing around with alternative learning methods, more problem and project-based, different types of supervision. And as part of a student group, we started also experimenting with the first online software solutions. So for example, in the end of the 1990s, we were running online project hotels and offering students in both the NTNU campus and around the country ways of profiling themselves. So this type of digital support for work, learning and social engagement has been something that's kind of been at the core of my interest for a long time, like technology-enabled learning, basically.
Mm-hmm. And then I think you have a little bit experience with Trondheim Kommune and in NTNU, and you start your organization. Can you explain a little bit about Baracraft Center and what is the future for this company if you have a plan for 5 years?
Yeah, so there were kind of a few distinct steps there. I was towards the end of working on my degree at the university. We realized that a lot of the stuff we're doing on knowledge management, on learning, basically could also form the basis of a new organization. So before I started working in my current position, the first thing I did was to start, together with other students, a company called Dossier Solutions, which is basically now a leading Nordic knowledge management software provider. Having had that experience of starting a company, I left the university after a while, and I went on to do my PhD work. And the combination of this interest in learning and technology led me at one point to work for the first time as a kind of government official or a bureaucrat, if you like, in the third city of Norway, Trondheim, looking specifically at their system for innovation and change, as I was advising the senior executives on how to develop the organization and increasingly also how to develop this in the face of large policy objectives like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This work over time afforded us in Trondheim, so not just the municipality and myself, but also partners like NTNU, like the County Authority of Trøndelag, many local businesses, the status as a UN Center of Excellence on Sustainable Development. So back in 2022, the work that we've been doing for a few years was basically recognized by the UN as something they would like to share with other UN countries. So for almost 3 years, I led a UN kind of affiliated Center of Excellence based here in Trondheim, and that's basically the starting point for the current organization. So back in 2022, we said to ourselves, what we have been doing here in Trondheim with the UN, especially working to help local communities measure how sustainable they are, this is something that's needed everywhere in Norway and around the world. Currently, the UN recognizes that there are about 10,000 cities, and these cities are very important for the development of future welfare, for sustainable communities, and for economic development in general. So in 2022 we said to ourselves, let's see if we can make this into a separate, independent, for-profit organization that can continue to refine and develop and distribute solutions and services to cities and local communities around Norway and outside. So that's kind of how the Sustainability Center that I'm currently heading came about, as a spin-off of this UN Center of Excellence, targeting specifically the needs and the potential for development in cities and local communities.
Mm-hmm. So I think in your organization you need to work with another organization and give them course. So you have start with work with HubSpot. What is the future from that work with HubSpot, or what do you have a plan if there is someone live now in Norway, in Trondheim, so he thinking about he want to have a course like course you do that with HubSpot. So how you can explain a little bit about this project?
Yeah. So what I like about the Sustainable Development Goals are they are offering everyone not just here where I live, but around the world, a shared language to talk about development. And the funny thing is, if you can really get to understand what sustainability means, it's opening up pathways, so basically opportunities for individuals and organizations to rethink how they can ultimately, even like myself, develop companies, create new jobs, contribute to economic development. And there is a lot of people out there that are looking for ways to contribute to the future development, positive development of their local communities, but they're kind of lacking maybe the points of entry or the relations or maybe some skills that makes them or enables them to go and take those opportunities for themselves and their families. So as a sustainability center, we've been looking specifically, especially over the last month and years, at what sustainability is, of course, and more specifically the social aspects of sustainability. As you might know, the Sustainable Development Goals amounts to a lot more than climate and environment. They're all about institutions, about participation, about inclusivity, about economic development, about education, public health. So what we're seeing is that the Sustainable Development Goals are creating a lot of opportunities for development, and ultimately also to think innovatively about what kind of jobs will exist in the future. So through our work with other organizations, like the one you mentioned, HopeSpot, that targets specifically the needs and opportunities of refugees and immigrants here in the Trondheim region, we started looking at how can we give more people the tools they need to move away from different benefits of welfare and kind of becoming a client of the state, and more towards entrepreneurship, understanding the needs of the future communities. How can you literally create a job for yourself where you are experiencing empowerment through entrepreneurship? So just over a year ago, we decided with our colleagues at HopeSpot and Brobyggerne, another organization, and finally also with the support of some of the local community, including the fund of their local regional banks, Sparebankfondet, let's set up a program where we engage with refugees and immigrants in the Trondheim region, looking specifically at how can we help them realize their business ideas. Simply because, in my experience, coming from the outside into a local community like ours, you will probably see different things, you will see different opportunities. So we are looking at ways of facilitating the translation of those opportunities into a business idea, into a business model, into a business plan, into a business where people are basically creating their own future-oriented and sustainable jobs as very much part of the sustainable development agenda. So that one of the programs that we've been working on has been to pinpoint exactly, like, what do you need by way of knowledge, by way of documentation, by way of, let's say, prototypes, skill sets that can make you take whatever business idea you might have been working on in the Ukraine or in Syria or wherever you came from, and realize that business idea here. It's a good thing for the person who is the entrepreneur. It kind of affords a pathway to autonomy and independence and economic freedom. And it's also good for the community by offering alternative and innovative ways to create a value for customers here in Trondheim. So this type of win-win, where you're also moving people away from a kind of situation of dependence to a situation of independence, although while creating community value, is very much at the heart of what we're doing. And this is like one of 3 similar kind of minded programs that we're running. Another program we're running with HopeSpot and other partners, including support from Gjensidige, has to do with integration and outdoor activities, for example.
I want to ask you why we say about HubSpot and Bro Beginner, and I think Trondheim Kommune, maybe?
Trondheim Kommune, of course, is involved. NTNU is involved.
Yeah, and you have any project next year with somebody else?
So one of the new things that we're launching with several of these partners, including through a dialogue with NAV and Gjensidige Stiftelsen and local businesses, is basically a program where the starting point is how do you bring more kids outdoors. This might come as a surprise to some, but you can actually go outside and have fun in the winter. I know it can be hard to believe that with the snow and cold and darkness you can go out, but knowing how to go out and enjoy nature and be part of the Norwegian society basically also means understanding how you can survive in the types of surroundings that we have to offer in this part of the world, especially in the winter season. So through a new program we are developing opportunities for kids to bring their extended families to outdoors activities, and we then said, besides just having fun outside, how can this type of program also involve a bigger part of the community so it has an element of inclusion? So supporting the outdoor activities for kids, we are also building a program for volunteers that want to be part of facilitating and delivering this kind of program. But then we wanted to go one further. How about those developing and being part of the program learning something about sustainability? So as part of having fun outside in the winter, we are also teaching kids and their families how to become responsible consumers. So we're playing around with software and data and learning models, where after you've been outside and had some fun, you also have learned something about what kind of products should you be buying in the shops to live more sustainably. How can you save on energy? How can you think about moving around in the city in terms of mobilizing people in ways that are more sustainable? So the types of programs we're working on now are basically nesting different types of value proposition. You have, of course, the public health interest. It's kind of good for your health to be outside, get fresh air, move and meet people. Then you have the integration perspective. So you are beginning to build a network, you learn language, you have maybe making friends and seeing future opportunities. And at the same time, you're contributing to reducing the carbon footprint and emissions from your own local community, in this case, Trondheim. And finding these types of models, connecting it to people, enabling a lot of volunteers to maybe take the programs and run them wherever they are living, and helping through technological means and data to also document the impact and results, also in terms of climate change, is something we're working on. We need these types of practical, action-oriented, knowledge-based models to accelerate our community's progress.
Yes. About data platform.
Yeah.
Can you explain for audience about this thing? You work about that, or your organization work about this side?
Yeah. So everything I've been saying so far has in some shape or form been linked back to Norway's and our international obligations under the so-called 2030 agenda. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or Goals for Sustainable Development. And I've also kind of reiterated that this has implications both for me as an individual and my local community. But then in order for you to, let's say you want to do something in the context of your community to make it more sustainable, then you need some understanding of how are we doing right now? Is my community healthy? Is my community educated? Is my community experiencing good quality of life? Are my kids safe? Are we polluting the planet, or are we taking care of the environment? Like, it's very hard to just have an opinion about this unless someone can help you really understand how are we doing, like on public health, on education, on transportation, on emissions, on economic development. So what we set out to do already in the UN Center of Excellence, that later became a core part of the Sustainability Center that I'm leading together with my colleagues, is to democratize the access to relevant data. So everyone, wherever they live in Norway, can literally go into a page and see my municipality, my local community. Are we sustainable or are we not sustainable? Not just in general, but also in specific areas. So we are basically developing and offering open source solutions to democratize people's opportunity, whether you're an individual or an organization, to see where is their need for action, where are there opportunities to innovate, maybe create a business, where do we need investments today and down the road. And this is very much at the core of the data platform. So we are basically trying to enlighten everyone, giving them access to updated information and data that can tell them something about where do you stand, where should you be, and inviting more people to be part of assessing and defining how do we get from A to B in a reasonable amount of time, but then doing so in a way that stimulates to positive contributions and engagements in the public sector and the private sector, and of course increasingly through different types of partnerships. So if you have a need in a local community and you're an entrepreneur, how to connect those needs so the community gets the job done and you get a job.
I will ask you about your project. When you are start with your project, I think there is some point are easy, some point was difficult. And I think from our audience, there is many people thinking about how they can start with company. Have you, can you speak about the difficult things you get it in your way, like founding or something like that? And if you have tips for them, what you give them, what you can give them information.
So again, I think the journey might look different depending on the person to some extent, and then there are certain things about setting up a business that are a bit universal. And what I really like about the spirit of entrepreneurship is it gives you kind of an instant feedback on how your ideas are resonating with needs out there in society. Right? So what you're doing when you're working as an entrepreneur is you're trying to constructively, positively, at least from my perspective, solve a job that someone needs someone to do. And you want to do this with a good quality and as efficiently as you can, right? So in general, I think this is a bottleneck for a lot of entrepreneurs. In order to really understand the needs of your market, you need to engage that market. You cannot sit inside your garage and make shit up without engaging at the same time with those people, let's call them customers, who you expect will be offering payment for whatever product or service you're developing. So the first piece of advice is network, network, network. The more you can kind of get out there, get feedback on what you're doing, make friends and relations, it will begin to qualify and direct you in a direction that ultimately is more likely to pay off financially. You are not able to sell people normally something that does not come across as meaningful and useful for that audience. So that is one thing. The other thing is making sure you take advantage of the ecosystem of support. So it's kind of an extension on my point on networks. Trondheim specifically is a leading hub, like a leading community on startups. So in this place where we're sitting now, which is a co-working space, down the road at other similar spaces like Digs, you will find a lot of people working on different business ideas as part of a startup community. So being part of this type of community, like literally by subscribing month by month to a desk, so you're part of the discussion and part of like the flow of ideas and energy in this space, you are also kind of training yourself to ask a certain set of questions that you kind of need to work on as a sustainable development entrepreneur or entrepreneur in general. And of course this ultimately ties into which traditionally becomes the bottleneck for every startup. How do you pay for stuff, right? So you're trying to hone in your idea, you're trying to manage a relationship over time to a market, and you're trying to sustain yourself in the intermediary. I mean, you still have to pay for your food and your rent and whatever, right? So in a nutshell, what I see is powerful, is connect to the world, talk to people, take advantage of the ecosystem, including the programs that we are offering on entrepreneurship, but it could be other programs, just so you know what the types of questions and discussions are that involve setting yourself up for success. And a lot of the time by working in this way, you make relations, you adjust your thinking, you optimize your product, and you're also enabling yourself to express what you're doing in a language that speaks to partners, to investors, to customers over time. And then of course there is the nitty-gritty of actually setting up a legal entity. But a lot of these practicalities, there is a support network around you that could help you, guide you in creating your business plan and your budgets and everything you need to tap into grants, to talk to investors, to set up partnerships with other companies or organizations. So I don't think there is one simple way. There is, if you want to start a company, it's not the easiest way to make money. So you also have to be clear on why are you doing it, right? Mm-hmm. Are you doing it to become independently wealthy? Are you doing it, like in my case, because I really care about the ideas and it gives me a freedom to learn things and do practical things? Or are you just looking for a type of freedom that you wouldn't get if you just take a position in another organization and you have people telling you what to do? So it's hard work, but at the same time, you're maybe able to develop some kind of independence that you wouldn't have elsewhere, where no one is telling you exactly what to do and you're more free to explore. So those are the things that I care about. Working on ideas, developing something with meaning, and not having a boss that tells me what to do all the time. I want to be my own boss.
That's fantastic. For me, I was making more than 20 questions, and I hope I can ask you a lot of questions, but I think the time doesn't help us. So if I ask you about my project, Engineering Encyclopedia, and before you give me advice at make a project for children, and then I think about that and I work with Trondheim Kommune, like Stotta Contact, and I try to make what you give me advice about that, and learn the children about drone and 3D printer and 3D pen. So it was very fantastic tips for me, and what do you have more tips for me for my project?
So what I really like about, at least I don't know everything you're doing, but parts of what you're doing is you're kind of paying it forward, right? So you've had the benefit and the blessing of being able to play around with technology, for example 3D printing, which involves a lot of skill sets, and it opens up some interesting opportunities, right? You can unleash creativity. There is a technical element to this, like working with the hardware and the materials, and you can also generate a lot of, let's say, business opportunities on top of this type of technology, either serving others who need to print a prototype or basically need an introduction. So like I was saying initially, if you think in terms of the future of work, this is another technology that you know that is opening up opportunities for young people. And what I really like about your program, and I think you should emphasize it more and more, is your value proposition is basically empowerment through entrepreneurship as well. So my tip would be to be very kind of precise on how can you basically use this type of technology. What do you need to know? How can you go about creating, let's call it business models. And I think you can start doing this at a very early age, and that's why I'm fascinated by what you're doing. You're basically triggering kids' imagination, but to get there, you are investing in their basic understanding of the technology, and you're affording them a practical, hands-on way to understand this. And I can say from a perspective of a parent of two 13-year-old boys, I would be very interested as a customer to see my kids embracing this type of technology, simply because I think it's increasingly important growing up to understand what kind of jobs, what kind of technologies, what kind of value propositions you can be part of developing and delivering. I do not think we're moving into a future where there will be a set of static jobs that we're all competing for. I think we can increasingly, through the lens of sustainable development, for example, begin to rethink what value creation is, how I am part of that creation, how I can tap into and get my upsized share of the value that I contribute, all the while doing it in a social context where my interests are commensurate with the overall well-being of local communities. And to the best of my abilities, I'm seeing your training program and your approach to technology as very much kind of playing into and supporting this type of initiative. And I guess my most important advice is continue doing it, because I think we can talk about it and discuss it and conceptualize it. But once you get 10 kids into a room and give them technology, shit happens. They damage it, they might use it for things you have no idea. So creating that safe space, backed by information, supported by technology, and with an explicit ambition of how do you create value, and having that discussion lively within your program, I think will continue to empower you to draw people and interest into that program. I would definitely send my own kids there.
Oh, thank you. I hope I do that next year.
What do you think?
I was said we have too much question, and I write too much question, but I don't want to have all the question in this episode. I like to ask you about how much people engaged in sustainability.
So we're in a strange situation where when we measure, we can see that a lot of people, including and especially people that are younger, so typically below 35 years old, they tend to be worried about what the future will bring. What will happen to me, my economic security, my family's future, and of course everything that has to do with climatic changes and, let's say, risks posed by more environmental factors. So you have this concern and awareness, and then you have a big discussion on the other side about how do people engage, how can they be part of something? Because it's very bad for people to sit on the one side and worry about the future, and at the same time not figuring out how can I kind of display a kind of form of agency, do something, like be part of a solution. So at the core of everything we're doing is trying to figure out how can you take this energy and direct it towards work that on the one hand kind of brings your focus away from doom and gloom and affords you something tangible to do. And in different ways, all the programs that I've been mentioning has this built into them. Instead of sitting passively, just getting concerned and stressed and making yourself sick, find ways of connecting. And the bizarre thing is there is a lot of need for this type of contribution, but it's been surprisingly hard if you actually wake up and say, I want to do something. Like, who do I call? What do I do? And why? Type of thing. So in a small way, and this is something all organizations can do, especially those pertaining to work on sustainable development, we get a lot of requests from young people. They could be students at NTNU, they could be immigrants who are working their way into the fabric of the local communities. It could be grown-ups who just want to do something real and not just manage a bullshit job. So they would typically call us and say, can we come and do an internship, or do you have projects that you can work on? So what we're trying to do, and again I'm encouraging everyone else in organizations to do this, is help people connect to these types of opportunities. So at any given time we would have between 5 and 15 people in different capacities coming in and working as part of our team on specific programs. And then they get to learn something about sustainability. We introduce them to tools and models, and then you're kind of you have the possibility of going out and engaging in the local community, doing practical things. And the benefit of this is that you stop worrying about what sustainability means, because you're more focused on actually making the situation better. And in the process, you are also understanding the future of work. Like, what kind of positions will open themselves up in the future? What kind of needs out there can I tap into when I want to position my skill set and my interests in relation to a marketplace for future positions? And we're, I think, basically also tapping into a new way of learning by doing that is more commensurate with the open-ended and maybe more fluctuating shape of the future job market. I think we're doing a lot of people a disfavor by pacifying them, letting them worry, training them for the wrong type of work, given the huge amount of needs out there. So we're really in the business of connecting the dots. And as a kind of final remark on this, I think it's been a failure of our generalized way of thinking about community development that we talk too much about big problems and not enough about how does this translate into opportunities for personal development and growth. So I started this conversation by linking the work that I'm doing under the Sustainable Development Center here in Trondheim to the Sustainable Development Goals. What we're seeing now is that the Sustainable Development Goals are being matched with goals for personal development. And the cool thing is, if you're smart about this link between community development and personal development, it directly impacts positively your own quality of life. So we, for example, know that if you are able to help others, establish meaningful relationships, learn through doing, even being outdoors and experiencing change, it has a positive impact on your quality of life. So that type of development is productive both for yourself and for the wider community. And those types of models will be increasingly important. We cannot go into the future thinking we will change big things in the community without having a vehicle to discuss how this is also making changes to the way you develop as an individual. What kind of values are driving you? What constitutes your definition of success? What kind of world do you want to live in? What do you want for your kids? And being part of forming this makes you more empowered and more likely not to get consumed by like concern about the future or the environment or the economy or everything else that you could just eat yourself up over. It's much better to do something, and we and other organizations are trying to connect those dots and welcome everyone else who's interested.
If you have word for the listener, what do you will give them, words or advice?
So as a rule of thumb for myself, in everything I do, I can set out to accomplish something. But every time you want to do something, for example, you are developing your podcast, I think you should ask yourself, how can I do my job in a way that makes it easier for other people to do their job, right? So when we say we work on sustainable development, we know well that we will not be the only solution to sustainable development. So every time you do something, you should kind of pause for a second and think, who else is trying to accomplish the same thing as I am? And then see how can you listen for those voices? How can you link to them to see if you can combine your energy and resources and basically also engage them in a discussion like you are doing today, by the way. What can we do together to achieve more with less?
The conversation don't end it. So I have two last questions. I want to ask how much people engaged in sustainability.
So the challenge, which is very interesting, is that on the one side, a lot of people care to the point where some people are getting stressed and anxiety is kind of prevailing. And this is kind of amplified by the fact that maybe you are concerned and you want to contribute to developing, let's say, your local community, but you don't know how, right? You don't know who to talk to, you don't know where to go to find out, and of course, by extension, it's very hard to understand exactly how I can be part of the solution. So everything we've been doing, whether this is at the individual or organizational level, has been to try to connect people and organizations to the needs out there of a community. And I think we have a huge potential. I don't only think, I know, because we've been studying the numbers, to do more collectively if we are smarter about how we open up the door for more people to do more things. But it's not obvious how you organize this. So you kind of need models, you need support systems that can help people navigate the sustainable development space and be part of something. So that's, I think, one of our major challenges moving forward, that it doesn't become like an exclusive club of people working on sustainability that just imposes their ideas and solutions on everyone else, but making it to a kind of truly grassroots, legitimate type of initiative.
And the last question, do you have word for the listener?
I would say, if I were to kind of share any piece of advice, and this might seem very, very simplistic, but in everything I'm doing, and I try to instill this in at least my own organization, is you can focus on the one side only on your work and doing your best and optimizing within your means, which is kind of what we typically tend to do. The problem is, though, that unless you really understand how your behavior is affecting other people's chances of being productive, you get a very different type of conversation. And within the domain of sustainability specifically, it seems to kind of develop to some respect into a competition more than a collaboration. So I kind of urge everyone, individuals and organizations, to be more generous, right? How can I do my job slightly different so that my contribution is also making it easier for others to contribute? So let's say you're working in a daycare center, right? So you have your job, you're taking care of the safety and health and the development of the kids. But is there something you can do that also helps other parts of your community do their work, taking care of the family and the public health and the transportation system, etc.? And once you start thinking about these types of connections, it turns out there are a lot of possibilities to do more together than everyone trying to do the best they can on their own. Not only that, but it also opens up, going back to what I was saying earlier, opportunities to redefine work, redefine value creation, and redefine social expectations and patterns of behavior in ways that are more inclusive, more productive, and actually more in line with the overall spirit of the 2030 agenda from the UN, like leaving no one behind. And I think that would be the key message. Work in ways that you are not excluding people, but in fact always kind of keeping an eye on, is what I'm doing opening up, or is it closing off the opportunities for others to be part of the solution in practical ways?
This is the first time in my life there is someone understand what I'm thinking. So I'm very happy for this podcast and for this conversation, Dr. Kristian. And I hope everything will continue with your company or organization. And thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Mohammad. It's been a pleasure contributing to your podcast.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.